Over the last few years, things haven't quite gone to plan at Manchester United Football Club. Whether we're talking transfers, performances on the pitch, or just club dealings as a whole, it's not been the best time to be a Manchester United fan, and today I'm going to take it upon myself to try and change that. Because I'm stepping in as Manchester United manager over the course of the next 4 episodes, over the course of 4 seasons, I'm going to try and take this club to Champions League glory. So Erik ten Hag is out, and yes, I know he's won an FA Cup, but let's be honest, his tenure isn't going anywhere, and I'm going to try and get the club to the point where it's winning trophies like this on a regular basis and building back a club that Manchester United fans can love. Now, despite their recent issues, they've still got great players, Bruno Fernandes being one. I'll be hoping Matthijs de Ligt can be a huge part of our defensive rebuild, and whilst he can be a divisive figure, I think Marcus Rashford could be key on that left-hand side. And whilst a lot of the attention around the club seems to be pretty bleak, there are some great young players with a lot of potential. Kobbie Mainoo is certainly one of those. Now an England international, he'll be key in our midfield. Starboy Alejandro Garnacho will hopefully be a big player. And let's not forget Lenny Yoroiva, who's so good Man U had to fight Real Madrid for his signature. But if we're being honest, this squad is still nowhere near the level it will need to be to try and challenge for a Premier League title. And that's backed up by the fact that Football Manager thinks we've only got 16-1 odds of winning the title, and we're predicted 5th place. Competition-wise, we are in the Europa League for our first season here, where the board want at least a semi-final finish. Obviously, it's not quite the Champions League, but I'd still happily win the Europa League any day. But to win trophies like that, the club is in need of a rebuild, and there's some big decisions we're going to have to make early on about who stays and who goes. As you can see, there's a lot of big name players whose contracts are up at the end of this first season, from Amad Diallo to Johnny Evans, Lindelof, Maguire and Eriksen. We're going to have to make a decision on all of those guys. And transfer budget wise, the club seem to have used up most of their funds for this season, with only £1 million for me to spend. So I think my first job in pre-season is going to be to get some players out and bring some players in to try and take this team to a level where we can at least qualify for the Champions League. And despite that small budget, we were actually able to bring in a player to help our team, but it did require us selling on one of our current players. And that was Victor Lindelof, one of the only players I could get out the door that I wanted to sell. I couldn't get rid of some players. Casemiro, we're looking at you. But yes, Victor Lindelof has moved on. Thankfully, West Ham were interested. They offered him a pretty big wage as well, and a Swedish international has left the club for 15 million, which I think is probably not a bad sale. And that meant we could then bring in a new player to help bolster our midfield ranks. But before I show you him, I'll give you a few seconds to go down, smash the like button for me. It really helps the videos, and subscribe to the channel as we push for 50k subscribers. But that's all done. Make sure you've done that. Let's go see the player. And I know what you're thinking. Lewis Ferguson, who the hell's that? How is he good enough for Manchester United? Well, I'm trying to adopt a different strategy here with Man United than they have done over the last few years, where they've spent a lot of money on players that haven't quite come good. I'm trying to find players that suit the tactical profile of the squad I'm building, that hopefully will help build this club up and get them back to the level they once were. So yes, I know he's not a star name, but Lewis Ferguson is a very good player. He's a 24-year-old Scottish international, a very good all-round midfielder who's been signed from Serie A side Bologna, where he was doing so well under Thiago Motta in real life last season. He's cost us 25 million, formerly of Aberdeen. I know Man United have just sold on a Scottish midfielder, but I've got a new one in. I think he's a dynamic option, a great worker as well in the middle of the park with 17 work rate, and fingers crossed he's going to be the kind of player that can really help our other players with more quality shine. But I did mention I'm building players to fit a tactical system, so let's show you that tactic. It's a 4-3-3, which yes, Man U do play in real life, but this is a very aggressive gegenpressing style. We're going to be hunting down every ball and looking to counter-attack at the first opportunity. I want to bring back the days of the fast, free-flowing football that Manchester United fans were used to, scoring plenty of goals while still having a rock-solid defence. Now, it's not necessarily the team that I would play, but if you were to ask Football Manager, this is what our best 11 would be considered in this tactic. You're looking at Mazraoui, De Ligt, Martinez and Shaw in front of Onana, with a midfield of Mount, Fernandes and Casemiro, which, if they can all stay fit, could be a good midfield. Then Antony, Rashford and Xerxes, and it's probably in those attacking areas I feel like we lack a little bit, but I am trying to think long term with the club, which I feel like they haven't done enough recently, and I am planning for the future. So the likes of Kobbie Mainoo will be prioritised over Casemiro's minutes, and I'll be doing that in other positions too. For example, at centre-back, our best options are of course De Ligt and Martinez, with even Maguire and Johnny Evans currently considered better than Lenny Yoro, but I promise you, Lenny Yoro will be playing plenty of football this year. Now obviously while I was doing those transfer dealings, we were playing some pre-season football, and I'll be honest, didn't go too great. We drew 3 games, we only won 1, and we lost another one, and we didn't really play any major sides, but our first test was up in the Community Shield against none other than Manchester City. And we gave them a proper good game. Xerxes scored the opener after 31 minutes, but his debut goal was quickly cut back when Manchester City scored, John Stones finding De Bruyne to equalise on 39. We then had a corner just after the half-time whistle, and it was powered home by Martinez, but of course the big Norwegian forward Erling Haaland wasn't having any of that, and he made it 2-2 with the help of De Bruyne. But we didn't give in, we kept pressing, and you can see the press working here, Anthony finding Xerxes, who put us 3-2 up, before Haaland scored from a spot to equalise and take us to penalties. And it went to sudden death when Kobbie Mainoo missed his shot. And that was that. We had lost our first official game as manager, losing the Community Shield, but a 3-3 draw with City isn't too bad. We gave it a good go, our tactics seemed to be working, and even though our youngster Mainoo missed, we're not going to let that affect us. We're going to keep playing him and hope for the best going forward. Now heading back to the season preview, after the transfer business that we've done, we're now only predicted 15-1 instead of 16-1 odds of winning the title, so clearly things have got a little bit better, but that was all to be tested in our first game of the season against Tottenham Hotspur. It was a big clash and a very tight game at Old Trafford, but we managed to get the advantage, Xerxes finding Eriksson, scoring against his former club and getting us our first win as Manchester United manager. So all looked to be going well, and for the first few months of the season, I think we could say it was pretty successful. But then in the next game, we played Aston Villa and we lost 4-0, so it was definitely a back to reality moment for us. A 2-2 draw with Brentford followed, and I started to think things might be going wrong, but we were soon back to winning ways, beating Wolves 3-0, and from there, we went on for the next 2 months to not lose a single game. We drew 1 in the Europa League, but we can forgive that. But an early exit in the Carabao Cup to Everton seemed to spark a bit of a downturn. A 3-2 loss at Anfield followed by a 0-0 draw against Fulham, and it all reared its head in an ugly 3-0 loss against Arsenal. After that, our form was mixed to say the least, and between November and December, we were picking up wins and losses and draws, and there was no real consistency in it, and before we knew it, we were already back around playing Aston Villa again, as we did at the start of the season. We were a few days away from the new year, and we were hoping that it would be New Year, new Manchester United, when Amad Diallo played the ball in and Garnacho managed to score. And whilst we've only been at the club 6 months, maybe this was a sign of progress, because before we knew it, Xerxes had made it 2, and just to seal the deal, Garnacho got the ball in the 70th minute, found new signing Ferguson, who drove in the area and scored to win. So at this stage, despite the mixed form, we're still very much in contention for a Champions League spot. We've got 36 points, 6 losses, 3 draws and 11 wins coming up till January, and we have Arsenal sitting at the top of the table, 9 points ahead of us. But of course, January is a big deal because it now meant that we could start bringing in some new players to try and help this squad. But to raise funds for that, a big sale was needed, and I was delighted when I saw a huge offer come in for Casemiro. Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia offered him £1 million a week, took him off our hands for £48.5 million. A great deal for a player that had been playing this year, but not playing very well, and someone that was certainly past his best, and I was happy to bring that money in, especially when you see the player that we were able to sign in his place. But before I show you him, if you want to continue these rebuilds yourself, you can find the save files over on my Patreon for every single rebuild that we've ever done. Of course, it helps support me as a creator, and I'm very thankful for it, but if you want to join the hundreds of people that continue these rebuilds, I'd massively appreciate the support over there. But let's go and see who we bought in. Don't worry, this isn't the big signing I was leading up to, but this was a player we were able to get for the money. I recruited a 19-year-old young French defender. He was playing for FC Nantes in France. He's cost us 6 million. I've loaned him back out for the season. The transfer could rise to 8, but he is someone who could have a big future in our defence. His name is Nathan Zeze. But the big one, Lucas Paquetá, has joined Manchester United. He was on the transfer list. The Brazilian 27-year-old was available for 35 million. I don't know what had happened to him at West Ham, but he clearly fell out with the manager despite his great performances, so we were able to bring him in. He bolsters our midfield and means we're not so reliant now on players like Bruno Fernandes. But speaking of reliance, Joshua Xerxes is someone that we have relied upon a lot this year. The new Dutch signing has scored 9 goals in the Premier League. He's got 16 goals goals in all competitions, which is way more than anybody else, so he's been a huge help this year. And I'll be honest, we need as much help as we can get. We've already been knocked out of the Carabao Cup, and now it was time for our first game in the FA Cup, and let's just say, it didn't go too well. Now, we were up against Championship side Burnley, and we were hoping it would be an easy win to get us in round 4 of the competition, and it looked like it might be when Rasmus powered one home after 11 minutes. A very Van Persie-esque goal there for Manchester United, but unfortunately, Burnley weren't just sitting and watching that in awe. They came up the other end only a few minutes later and equalised. We were then able to add a second, Garnacho finding Ugarte, who managed to knock it back to Garnacho, who then scored, but we did then get Luke Shaw sent off, and that seemed to allow Burnley to grow into the game. We held out until the 70th minute, still with that 2-1 lead, but they came forward on the left, found Rodriguez, who made it 2-2, and then calamity struck in the 87th minute. Lenny Yoro fell asleep, Matthijs de Ligt with a bad ball, and Burnley scored to knock us out of the competition. We had 13 shots, they had 4, it doesn't matter, they beat us 3-2. Thankfully, we did manage to bounce back against Brentford, but with lots of games coming up, including a Europa League round of 16, we need to really get up to scratch because we're currently out of 2 cup competitions, and the board are really on our backs now to start getting some results. And despite some blips here and there, we were able to get some good ones, like when Lenny Yoro helped us to beat Liverpool. But the biggest sign of our progress as the season went on was against Arsenal, who, remember, we lost 3-0 to at the start of the season, but at Old Trafford, Garnacho opened the scoring to make it 1. And in this second half, we really started to pile on the pressure. Mazraoui and Anthony linking up on that right-hand side, managing to pull the ball into the area for a goal. An own goal, mind you, but I think Anthony is going to claim that one. We then were able to make it 3-0 against Arsenal, youngster Kobe Mainoo proving why we backed him up as he found Højlund in the area to make it 3. And if that wasn't enough, Rashford pounced on a William Saliba error, you don't see too many of them, to allow the ball to eventually find Christian Eriksen, who scored another for us. But it definitely felt like in the second half of this season we were controlling games a bit better, picking up some more results, and whilst there was some draws here and there, things were certainly on an upwards trajectory, and that continued in the Europa League where we'd made a quarter-final. And with it being the only cup competition we were now in, we really wanted to get far, and thankfully we were drawn against French side Lille and we managed to dispatch them comfortably to make it to a semi. But we were soon brought back down to the ground when I saw who we were up against in the semi-final. It was none other than French giants PSG. They first came to Old Trafford and they took the lead through Goncalo Ramos, but we were in good form and we wanted to show that against the Parisians, Garnacho getting in the area and making it 1-1. Marcus Rashford then did miss a penalty, but we still managed to get a second goal, Garnacho on the right, finding Xerxes in the middle, who tucked it away to put us in the lead. But late on in the game, a headed away corner found Vitinha, who played Asensio, whose deflected shot broke our hearts. So it was 2-2 and we were now heading to the Parc des Princes needing a result to make a Europa League final. And unfortunately, an early penalty from Asensio put PSG in the lead, and a second goal really killed us off. We were unable to gain any momentum in this match before Fabian made it 2. It was 4-1 aggregate, and unfortunately, that was the end of our Europa League run. Not a bad result in terms of who we lost to, but still, we wanted to really make the final of that and try and win a cup competition, especially when the league wasn't going the best it could, because despite a late resurgence and some consecutive wins towards the end of the year, we finished in 5th place, 1 point away from a Champions League spot, 13 points away from local rivals Manchester City, who won the title. Aston Villa finishing just above us is something that I think we wish we could have changed, especially when we only lost 9, but we drew so many matches that really affected us this year. We were joint on goal difference as well, but it wasn't to be. It looks like it's going to be Europa League football again next season. So it was a mixed bag of a first year, but at least there was some things that we could take as positives, like Lenny Yoro's development, who has grown into a very good centre-back for us and hopefully still has a big future to grow still. Kobe Mainoo maybe isn't as good in Football Manager as he should be compared to real life, but we're starting to get him to that level with the development that he's shown. And in the end, Xerxes did manage to help us out quite a lot. He's scored 22 goals in all competitions this year, with Højlund scoring 13, 14 for Garnacho, and also 14 for Rashford. United. So there's plenty of big goal scorers in this team, and we're going to need them going forward if we're going to try and push for a Champions League title. Now, I have made some big decisions on players' futures. Johnny Evans' contract is up, we're not renewing it, and despite his efforts this year, the same can be said for Christian Eriksen. He was pretty good for us across the course of the season, but I don't want to rely upon him long term, and also he was on £170,000 a week. So with the business we've done, in next episode in season 2, we're going to have £70 million to spend and 170 grand of wage budget to keep improving this squad. But how do you think we did in season 1? Let me know if you think it was a success or not, and let me know if you're liking this new format, something I'm trialing for the next couple of weeks with this rebuild with Manchester United, as opposed to the long form 40-minute single episode 5-season blasts that we normally do. We're going to try and pace this out a little bit different, so let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in episode 2.